Stop scrolling. In exactly 47 days, the WNBA season is supposed to tip off. But there's a problem. No one knows if it will. And I'm not talking about scheduling conflicts. I'm not talking about TV rights. I'm not even talking about player injuries. I'm talking about a negotiation that could define the next decade of women's basketball.
They did come back with something, and the first to report it was Sports Business Journal. It says WNBA's latest revenue share offer doesn't exceed 15%, but the league does bend on housing and facility standards.
Because while you were watching the Super Bowl, while social media was debating touchdowns and commercials, the WNBA quietly delivered a counteroffer that just made everything explode. The players want 30% of revenue. The league offered half that. And if this doesn't get resolved, the sport that just had its biggest year ever, the league that broke attendance records, the moment that everyone said was finally here.
So the latest CBA proposal was submitted on Friday night, and it did not include a revenue split beyond 15%. The WNBPA had waited almost 6 weeks for a WNBA reply to its request for a 30% share of league and team revenue and a $10 million plus salary cap. Although it was believed the league had previously offered 15%, sources told Sports Business Journal it was always less than 15%, and that Friday night's offer similarly did not surpass that number.
Could implode before summer even starts. This isn't clickbait. This is structural breakdown. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what's at stake and why this moment is bigger than basketball. Let's go. But first, quick thing. If you want weekly breakdowns like this, where we don't just read headlines, we dissect power dynamics, CBA mechanics, and the real money behind women's sports, you need to subscribe to WNBA Shorts right now. Because what you're about to hear, mainstream outlets won't touch this. Hit subscribe. We've got work to do. Let's rewind. Super Bowl Sunday, February 9th, 2025. While 120 million people were watching the Patriots and Seahawks, while brands spent $7 million per 30-second ad spot, while the entire sports world was distracted, the WNBA delivered its counterproposal to the players' union. Quietly, strategically, deliberately. Now,
So basically, it seems like the league came back to them, changed some other things that I feel like are things that could be easily negotiated. We've talked about it in previous episodes. They changed some of those things, and they maybe budged like 1% on the revenue split. And what we've been hearing from all the players is if they do not budge on the revenue split, like that's all that they're focused on, and the players are also not going to budge. So we're getting to the point where one of them is either going to concede or they're going to strike or lock out because they're just calling one another's bluff. Basically, the players are saying, we're not budging until you give us this gross revenue split of 30%. The league is offering a net revenue split of 70%, and the league took 6 weeks to respond to this, and it doesn't seem like they changed too much.
Here's what the league wants you to focus on. White heavy checkmark 1-bedroom apartments for certain minimum salary players. White heavy checkmark studio apartments for developmental roster players. White heavy checkmark improved facility standards. White heavy checkmark better travel accommodations. Sounds good, right? Wrong. Because that's not what this fight is actually about. The fight, the real fight, is about one number: revenue share. The players are reportedly asking for 30% of gross league and team revenue. The league's counteroffer? Sources suggest it stays under 15%. Let me say that again. The players want 30. The league offered under 15. That's not a negotiation gap. That's a philosophical chasm. And here's why that matters more than housing upgrades. Because revenue share isn't just about money. It's about identity. It tells players whether they are growth partners who share an upside or cost centers who get managed like expenses. And if you've been following women's sports over the past 18 months.
And the WNBA's latest proposal included some concessions on housing. 1-bedrooms would be available for players on their applicable minimum salary and with 0 years of service, 2026 to 2028.
You know which category these athletes deserve to be in. Record attendance, white heavy checkmark. Historic TV ratings, white heavy checkmark. Sold out arenas, white heavy checkmark. Cultural momentum, white heavy checkmark. The WNBA just had its best year ever, and the players are saying, if we help build this growth, we deserve a share in it. The league is saying, growth is promising but not guaranteed. That's the divide. And it's about to get messy. Now, before we go further, Here's what we're covering in this breakdown. Keycap 1, why the revenue share gap is actually a power struggle. Keycap 2, what the 1964 NBA strike comparison gets wrong. Keycap 3, the invisible cost no one's talking about, product quality. Keycap for the strike timeline and why leverage might not be what you think. Keycap 5, what happens next and why this defines the entire decade. Stick with me. This gets deeper. Let's talk about framing, because every negotiation has a narrative. And in this one, the players are the heroes, not because they're flawless, not because every demand is reasonable, but because they're betting on the future value of the league. The system, ownership, league executives, institutional caution, is betting on risk mitigation. Here's the difference. The players see Caitlin Clark effect equals sustained ratings growth. Expansion teams coming in 2026, Golden State, Portland, Toronto. Billion-dollar momentum in women's sports. Corporate sponsors fighting for partnerships. The league sees one breakout rookie doesn't guarantee long-term trends. Expansion requires stability, not volatility. Operating losses in most franchise histories. Cautious investor sentiment. Both perspectives have data. But here's where it gets psychological. Athletes don't just respond to money. They respond to signals. Revenue share is a signal. It tells players, do you see us as foundational partners or replaceable labor? And that signal affects how hard players recruit free agents, how they talk about the league publicly, how they perform under pressure, whether they commit long-term or keep one foot overseas. This is emotional infrastructure. And if the league misreads it, the cost won't show up in spreadsheets. It'll show up in culture. And culture, more than contracts, determines whether a league ascends or plateaus. Which brings us to the comparison everyone keeps making real quick. If this analysis is hitting different than what you're seeing elsewhere, smash that subscribe button. We're building something here at WNBA Shorts. Weekly deep dives, CBA breakdowns, power dynamics, economic strategy. The stuff that matters. You in? Let's keep going. So here's what's happening on social media. The WNBA recently amplified a video referencing the 1964 NBA All-Star Game strike. Powerful moment. Historic symbolism. Players force recognition. Change professional sports forever. But let's be intellectually honest. The leverage mechanics are not the same. In 1964, the NBA strike happened minutes before tip-off of a nationally televised All-Star game. ABC had cameras ready. Fans were in the arena. The league couldn't afford the embarrassment. Maximum leverage, maximum visibility, maximum pressure. Now, there's no game to stop.
Sometimes timing is everything in a strike, and it's hard to imagine a more perfectly timed one than the 1964 NBA All-Star strike that forced union recognition and changed professional sports forever. Today, NBA superstars are some of the most highly paid, respected, and influential athletes in the world. But rewind just a few decades, and you find a league where players were treated like replaceable parts in a busted machine. Before the bright lights, endorsements, and billion-dollar TV deals, players were fighting just to get a fair shot. In 1964, they ran the most important full-court press in NBA history, and won. In the 1950s and early 60s, the NBA was a struggling upstart. Players traveled on cramped buses, stayed in cheap motels, received next to nothing per diems, and played brutal back-to-back-to-back schedules with no off-season protections. They had no collective bargaining, no guarantees, and no real rights. Locked into restrictive contracts, players couldn't change teams. Injured players were treated as disposable. One bad break could end a career, and retirement came with no pension and no safety net. Even the biggest stars weren't spared. Bill Russell, the greatest winner in American team sports with 11 NBA titles, endured racist abuse on and off the court while the league looked the other way.
If WNBA players strike during this year's All-Star Weekend, there's no active season, no live broadcast to disrupt, no ticket refunds to process, no primetime humiliation. The leverage calculus is fundamentally different. Does that mean a strike wouldn't matter? Absolutely not. It would. Send a public message. Escalate media attention. Disrupt off-season operations. Create sponsor uncertainty. Force ownership to respond. But strategically, it's not a broadcast hostage situation like 1964. It's a long-game pressure campaign. Now, let's Steelman the league's position for a second. Because if we're being fair, and we should be, there's a rational case for caution. The argument goes like this. Revenue spikes tied to 1 or 2-star rookies shouldn't dictate permanent structural changes. Sustainability matters more than momentum. We can't lock in 30% gross revenue share based on one breakout year. That's not irrational. But here's where it weakens. Expansion teams are already coming. Media deals are already signed. Attendance growth is already multi-year. Corporate sponsorship interest is at decade highs, according to recent data. 2023 WNBA attendance, 1.59 million, highest since 2007. 2024 WNBA attendance, 2.35 million, plus 48% year over year. ESPN viewership for key games, up 170%. This isn't hypothetical momentum. This is measurable growth. And when growth becomes measurable, delaying revenue recalibration starts to look less like prudence and more like hesitation. And hesitation in a growth window is dangerous because windows close. Now, let's talk about something even more concerning. Something no one's discussing. Product quality. Here's the reality. If the CBA drags out, cross-mark expansion draft rules aren't finalized. Cross-mark core designation rules remain in flux. Cross-mark free agency could be shortened or delayed. Cross-mark players might sign one-year deals anticipating a richer market later. That creates instability. And instability affects everything. Expansion teams can't properly scout if they don't know protection rules. Overseas player evaluation becomes complicated. Roster construction becomes reactive instead of strategic. Front offices can't plan. Coaches can't build systems. Chemistry suffers. And here's the cold truth. Fans don't stay for negotiations. They stay for elite basketball. If the season starts late, if free agency becomes chaotic, if roster continuity suffers, the on-court product declines. And when the product declines, growth momentum stalls. This is the invisible cost of prolonged negotiation. The thing that doesn't show up in press releases. The thing ownership won't admit. Delay kills energy. And in a league that's finally capturing mainstream attention, energy is everything. But there's another layer. Player health. Right now, WNBA players still need to play overseas to make competitive money. Year-round basketball. No real offseason. Accumulated wear. Torn meniscus here. ACL there. Lower extremity injuries everywhere. Financial structure and physical sustainability are connected. If the league truly wants elite, rested athletes delivering peak performance, compensation must align with workload reality. Otherwise, the system unintentionally incentivizes overextension, and that's not sustainable. Not for the players, not for the product, not for the growth. Which brings us to the question everyone's avoiding, because right now, we're at the inflection point. But before I break down the timeline and the likely outcomes, do me a favor, drop a comment right now. Do you think the players should hold firm at 30%? Or does the league need more time to prove sustainability? I read every comment. Let's debate. Now, let's talk about what actually happens from here. If I had to project based on how these things typically unfold, here's what I think happens. Scenario 1. Season starts late, 60% probability. Negotiations extend into April. Players leverage public pressure. League makes incremental moves on revenue share, 18 to 22% range. Season tips off mid-June instead of mid-May. Shortened schedule, 36 games instead of 40. Playoffs happen on compressed timeline. Scenario 2. Players strike All-Star Weekend, 25% probability. Public spectacle forces emergency negotiations. Media amplifies the conflict. Sponsors get nervous. League accelerates talks to avoid summer chaos. Deal gets done, but tension lingers. Scenario 3. Full season delay, 15% probability. Impasse extends into summer. Season pushed to July or August. Olympics complicate international player availability. Product quality suffers dramatically. Long-term damage to momentum. I think we get scenario 1. Late start, incremental progress, compressed season. But here's what matters beyond 2025. If the league moves closer the player demands. White heavy checkmark signals belief in its own growth. White heavy checkmark unlocks player trust. White heavy checkmark trust fuels performance. White heavy checkmark performance fuels ratings. White heavy checkmark ratings fuel valuation. It becomes a virtuous cycle. If the gap remains wide and momentum stalls, crossmark narrative shifts from women's basketball is exploding. Crossmark to women's basketball couldn't capitalize. Crossmark growth window closes. Crossmark next generation of stars reconsiders the league. Crossmark overseas leagues become more attractive. It becomes a vicious cycle. And perception matters in business cycles. Because capital, investor capital, sponsor capital, media capital, follows momentum. Not nostalgia, not sympathy, momentum. So this moment isn't about apartments. It isn't about all-star symbolism. It isn't even about one CBA. It's about whether the WNBA sees itself as a rising major league or a cautious minor one. And that's the question no one in power can avoid forever. So here's the real question. Will this be remembered as a year the players forced the league forward or the year growth blinked? Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you're part of something, because WNBA Shorts isn't just a channel. It's where we document the real stories behind the headlines. Expansion strategy, CBA mathematics, off-season risk economics, power dynamics, revenue modeling, all of it. This league is at a turning point, and we're going to document every second of it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment with your take. Share this with someone who thinks they understand what's happening, but doesn't yet. I'll see you in the next breakdown.